Merlot lover right here. No shame, no shame. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Libations Academy, and today we are continuing our Wine 101 series with a grape that everybody knows about, but everybody loves to hate on, and that would be Merlot. I'll tell you why everybody hates Merlot. Let's backtrack time to the late 90s and early 2000s when Merlot was, at one time, the most popular grape in America. It was the it grape. It was super in fashion and everybody was drinking it. Everybody loved it. And then a movie called Sideways came out in 2004, and apparently, I haven't watched the movie, I know I'm bad, but apparently this main character hated Merlot and let everybody know about it. And literally overnight, it changed the industry for Merlot apparently forever, because we're 14 years later now and everybody still hates Merlot. When will this grape come back in fashion? Seriously, I cannot believe that a movie could do this, but it did. And even though it's a really sad story for Merlot, it kind of needed to happen because Merlot is actually one of those grapes that's pretty easy to grow. And, you know, if it's really popular, wineries were getting kind of lazy, apparently, from what I've told. So the quality of Merlot was going down anyway, and, you know, we needed it to go out of fashion for a bit. The good news today is that Merlots that are made are of very, very good quality, because if nobody's gonna be drinking this wine, you really have to like tell people how amazing your wine is, right? The crazy thing about Merlot is everybody hates it and nobody knows why. I can't tell you how many people I've met that are like, oh, I don't drink Merlot, no. And then they're like, oh, give me that Cabernet Sauvignon. And I give them a glass of Merlot and tell them it's Cab. And they believe me. And that's because Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot are two very, very, very similar grapes. And by the way, I usually do that test just for like, you know, educational purposes. I'm not like giving people Merlot and telling them it's Cab. But anyway, Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot are very, very similar grapes because they both come from the region of Bordeaux in France, and they are traditionally blended together. So of the two, usually Cabernet Sauvignon is a little bit more intense and just like big and deep and darker, and Merlot softens it up. Merlot is a medium to full-bodied wine, and this is where we're getting into those really, really dark fruit flavors. So think things like black cherry, plum, blackberry, and black currants. And if you do pick up a bottle from Bordeaux, you're gonna get a little bit more of those earthy flavors like leather and tobacco. And just side note, my telltale sign of a Bordeaux blend is usually rubber, which I know is a really weird thing to taste in your wine, but it's got that funky, just kind of synthetic rubbery note to it. Don't let that throw you off though. Merlot also loves oak, so if your wine has been aged in oak, it's going to pick up those vanilla and baking spice flavors. And then another telltale sign for me for Merlot is chocolate. So think of like a cocoa powder or sometimes like a milk chocolate. Very, very common in Merlot. Perhaps the biggest difference between Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot to me though is that Merlot is a little bit softer in like texture and tannin. So instead of like the really grippy tannins that you'll get in Cabernet Sauvignon, the Merlot tannins will be a little bit softer, a little bit more velvety, a little bit more silky, even though I hate that word. And in general, Merlot is just not as like deep and dark as Cab. It's softer, and that's why it's used so much in blends to round out and soften up that Cabernet Sauvignon. So if you're a Cab lover and you say that you absolutely hate Merlot, give Merlot a second chance. I'm telling you, there's a lot of great examples out there of this. And it's usually a better value than Cab because it's so out of fashion. So, you know, Cab is like super expensive just because everybody wants it. So Merlot is a really great alternative to have if maybe you just don't want to spend a bunch of money on your bottle of wine for tonight's dinner. So besides Bordeaux, you can find Merlot coming from California, in particular areas like Napa Valley and Sonoma. You can also find some really great Merlots from Washington State. If you want a really good value, I would recommend finding a bottle of Merlot from Chile. And then if you look a little bit harder, you can usually find Merlot from Italy and Spain as well. All right, let's talk about pairings. I absolutely love Bordeaux blends with lamb because I was mentioning, remember that like funky rubbery note? Well, it pairs really well with those funky flavors going on in lamb as well. I also love Merlot with filet mignon because, you know, this is a little bit lighter of a cut of meat, so it really works well with Merlot since Merlot is not as heavy as Cab, because Cab is usually our pairing to go with like bigger steak cuts. Then I also really love Merlot with things like roasted pork or just like pot roast or just anything roasted that's gonna have a lot of those hearty, earthy flavors. It usually works really well with Merlot. All right, guys, I'm ready for your comments on this one. Let me know below if you absolutely despise Merlot despite what I've talked to you about today, and give me a good reason, please, because let me tell you, Merlot it's so similar to Cabernet Sauvignon, and you can't hate Merlot but love Cab. You just can't. I just don't feel like you can. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Make sure to watch all the other Wine 101 videos in this series. I'll put the link for that below, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.